Hey, so there's been some new changes and some confusion in the air because we're with the 80s coming back strong and everybody trying to get those 80s Tyler guitar sounds. We've been doing a lot more series parallel and neck bridge on and the preamp and all this kind of stuff, specifically on like the 1987 guitar, but it's actually on any guitar. It's just a lot of switches. It's a lot of stuff to figure out, and it can be very confusing. So I thought I would do a quick video to just kind of break it down into sections that are easy to understand in a video that you can watch again and again until it kind of soaks in. Because once you have it, it's pretty straightforward, but until you do it, can be a little confusing. So I'm going to explain it like this, and we'll do some close-ups as well. So first off, you just have the normal guitar. If everything is off and all the pickups are in series, you got a volume and you got a 5-way. That works just like your normal guitar. And just in case somebody was new, volume controls the volume of the whole guitar. A 5-way is simply bridge, these two, this middle pickup, these two, neck pickup. Pretty straightforward. A lot of Tylers will have the Tyler version of a Demeter preamp, and that's this knob here. And when this button, you'd have to know which one, because these generally we put these in a similar place all the time, but usually it's right here. Up engages the preamp. When it's down, it's completely bypassed. If you're ever wondering if your battery goes dead or there's no battery in the guitar, the guitar is still going to work because it's completely passive, and then when you bring it up, then it's active. Then it engages the mid-boost knob. So what does the preamp do for you? Before you get into even any switching, just adding the preamp in on a Tyler basically makes it a low impedance signal. They also call it a buffered signal. So it basically takes your long cable out of the equation. Now with a long cable, it's like a bandpass filter, so it cuts some low end and it cuts some high end. So when you have a preamp on board, basically it makes it low impedance, so now the signal can just fly through the cable and it opens up the top and the bottom. So that's what you get just immediately, is that glass and that like rich low end when you just kick in the preamp. Then you have the mid boost that dials in and boosts mids. It's actually quite low. It's down around 100, so honestly it's really kind of a low boost, but we just call it a mid boost because that's kind of what people call it. And as it rolls off, as it boosts mids, it actually rolls off high end too pretty drastically. So if you go all the way, it can get pretty dark. And where that came from originally was back in the 80s, is the big soaring solo stuff where you're way up here and that can be kind of thin. You can kick in that mid boost and crank it up, like 3/4 of the way, and it just keeps that really sweet round when you're doing your high soloing. Another thing you can do with it is just roll it up 1/3 of the way on the neck pickup and just get kind of a nice jazzy kind of a sound. It's real cool. So experiment with it, because it's not meant to just be turned on. It's just giving you another tool to hit your amps and your effects differently. So just mess around with it. So that's the mid boost section. So far we've done normal guitar, and then we got a mid boost. So these work together and alone. So from there, we'll move to these 3 switches. Some guitars have 3 buttons. This has 3 switches so that you can get all the different options, series, split, and parallel. When we have just the buttons, it's normally series parallel. But what these switches do is switch from series to split to parallel for each pickup. Now, what it is series is your full blast sound, so we put it up. Loudest sound, biggest sound up. Parallel is 1/4 of the power. And I'll explain parallel in a minute. So down on these 3 switches is parallel for each pickup. It's not an on-off or anything like that. Your 5-way selects your pickups, and this just selects the sound of whatever pickup that you're selecting. So one thing I should explain, we'll just explain it on the humbucker to start out with, is series, split, and parallel. So series, just like many of you will remember from elementary school learning about Christmas lights. If you have Christmas lights in series and one Christmas light goes out, the whole line goes dead. But if it's wired in parallel, then you go in and out of each light at the same time. So if one light blows, all the lights don't go out, you just lose one light. So it's a very similar thing. You got 2 coils, so when you're in series, it goes into one coil, around, out, into the other coil, around, and then out. So it's in series. Parallel, it goes into both pickups coils at the same time, cruises around, and comes out at the same time. Now what that does for you is gives you the ability to select parallel, and that's 1/4 of the power of a full series humbucker. Pretty straightforward. And it's actually a similar thing that happens on just a normal Strat when you select position 2 and you get that kind of a smaller kind of a sound. It's parallel. Then you have split, and in this case it splits to the inner coil, if you're wondering. When we do split on a switch with this kind of operation, we split to this coil. Some of you out there might be listening to this and have a traditional Tyler where we do auto split. Because of auto split, we'll split to this coil because that's a really nice Strat sound. You don't want this coil on its own. It's an okay sound, but this is just a much better single coil sound. So one more time, series in one coil, out through the other coil and out. Fatter sound, your biggest sound, kind of normal for a humbucker wiring. Parallel, in both, out both, 1/4 of the powers. And you'll hear it. If you just play, you'll hear the difference. And split just splits to one coil. So now you might be asking yourself, okay, I get it. Now if I start talking about series parallel on these, you're going to be like, okay, I don't understand. Those are single coils. How are you doing series parallel? Well, what we have is we have canceling coils underneath the pickguard in this case. We do that with the JTOs, the James Tyler original pickups, and then our new canceling coil system. It's something that's been around for years, but again, with the 80s coming back, it was something I thought, hey, we should do canceling coils with our own 5500s and the pickups that we wind. Another pickup that we use is Seymour Duncan's. We'll use a lot of hot stacks or classic stacks. Now those are stacked humbuckers, so they're on top of each other, but in this case, underneath the pickguard, you'll see that it has canceling coils next to each other. So in essence, you have a humbucker. Well, why wouldn't that just sound like a humbucker? Because the canceling coil is not magnetized. So it's just a coil sitting next to this. So when you go, for instance, we'll just talk about just the neck pickup on its own. When you go from series to parallel, same as a humbucker, it goes from full blast to 1/4 power, and then split is just the coil that's showing in this case. The difference between series and split, very subtle, but if you're trying to get like a Stevie Ray Vaughan thing, you definitely want to be able to get to full single coil. But if you're doing a clean thing or almost anything else, the series and parallel are very close, but what you get with series is no noise. You don't get the 60 cycle hum. So that's basically the switches for the 3 pickups. And think of it as sections like I've been doing. You got your 5-way and volume, that's one part. You got your mid boost, that does a whole range of things that's separate from everything else. You got the 3 pickup selectors that allow you to change the character of each pickup. And just think of it as that's for this. So then on this particular guitar, which has been doing very well and a lot of people get it and they love it, but they have all these questions, what does everything do? Now we're going to come to another section, which will just is this button next to the 5-way. We call it a neck, just neck bridge on. Pretty straightforward. A lot of folks, and even Jim back in the day, that would have just, it would be a neck on. And what that allows you to do with neck bridge on is if you're here or here and you engage this, you get the outside 2 coils. And then anywhere in between is all 3 pickups. So just think of it, again, forgetting the rest of it, just this button, that's what that does. It turns on these 2 pickups to wherever you have the 5-way. So if you're here in position 1 or position 5, it's a telly-like sound. And if anywhere in between is all 3. And that's why we do neck bridge on, because then you don't have to think, okay, neck on, and then, oh wait, no, I got to go to the bridge. You can just be in one of these 2, kick it in, and you got both. Or anywhere in between, you got all 3. So before we go to the last option on this guitar, which is this switch hanging out here by itself, I want to talk a little bit about why all the canceling coils and the neck bridge on and all the series parallel. Well, it's all of these options that help you get to all those sounds that you hear on those like late 70s into the 80s and well into the 90s records, where it's like, what is that kind of different kind of clean sound? What's going on there? The most famous being Billie Jean, by Michael Jackson, was David Williams. He had a guitar that Jim modified for him, and that particular sound is all 3 pickups on with the middle pickup in parallel. and the preamp back then you couldn't bypass it, so preamp on, but no mid boost, and then they jacked straight into a mic preamp into an 1176. And recently I was out in Nashville looking at Dan Huff's guitar, and I had it at a friend's place, and we did that exact sound. We turned all 3 pickups on, put the middle pickup in parallel, and we jacked into a mic pre. And I'm going to throw up a video and so you guys can hear it, but it's just super fun. You hear this sound and you're like, oh, that's the sound, you know, because people think, wow, what kind of processing did they do after the fact? So getting back to how would you get that sound on this guitar, and you can get it like David Williams had classic stacks, but you can get it with just about any pickups that have the ability to do series parallel, and you got the preamp. The preamp's again what gives it the glassiness, and on this guitar you would basically select anywhere in between, turn on all 3 pickups, and put this middle pickup in parallel with the preamp on and down. And now if I was playing and you were listening, you'd be like, oh, that is the sound. That's just one place to start. I'm pretty sure Mike Landau used that kind of setup a lot. I think Jim shared that with Dan Huff, and he'll do it a little bit. What he does a lot is just have his bridge pickup in parallel. Just try different combinations. It's some kind of series and parallel combinations with 1 or 2 or more pickups. Just, you know, just try. They're all in that sort of sound, but all sound a little bit different. So just experiment with it for yourself. So what's this last little switch for? Well, imagine that you're doing a live gig at church or club or top 40 gig or whatever you guys do. You come up with a sound that's all 3 pickups on. It happens to be here. All 3 pickups are on, but in this case you have the neck pickup in series and both the middle pickup and the bridge pickup in parallel. Now, from here, if you had to do a solo, you're doing your rhythm, you know, got this real cool rhythm going, and you go to do a solo, you're going to have to shut that off, push this down to here, and then flick this switch up into series to get to your lead tone. And it's like, oh, okay, now you're doing your lead. Uh-oh, time to go back to rhythm. Okay, what was it? Oh, I got to go there, I got to pull this up, and I got to turn that on. That's a lot of work. So way back in the late 70s, Jim talked to a buddy of his named Dan Armstrong, and basically took a 4-pole double throw switch, and we call it the lead rhythm switch. So when it's down, pretty straightforward. Just again, think of this switch from what I'm explaining as its own little thing. So again, the guitar, the mid boost, one thing. The switches for each pickup, another thing. Neck bridge on is another different thing, and then the lead rhythm. So and instead of trying to think of it all together, think of it in those sections. So back to the lead rhythm, when it's down, pointed at this section, it's whatever you have set up here. That's what you're going to hear. All of this is engaged. When you pull it up, it goes to the bridge pickup in series. It doesn't affect the mid boost. You still have to kick that in and out depending on your sound and what you want to do with it. So again, down, you got your rhythm. So in this case, I got this crazy setup and I'm doing a rhythm. I click it up to here, I go here full blast, I do my lead, boom, I'm back to my rhythm. It's really about live more than anything, because if you're in the studio you would just get each sound ready to go. So that's basically it. As I always say, if there's any other questions, you can email me at info@tylerguitars. Just say, hey Rich, I got this one last question about it. But I think I've covered a lot of it. But again, if you got any questions, hit me up via email. And thanks for listening.